My name is David. I'm what you'd call a lighthouse keeper, though that sounds more romantic than it is. The government technically stopped hiring full-timers years ago, said the satellites and automatic systems made us obsolete. But some towers are too far out, too stubborn, or too strange to leave unmanned. So they keep a few of us around, people who don't mind the isolation, or who can be paid enough to pretend they don't. I didn't grow up dreaming about this kind of work. I didn't draw lighthouses in school or write essays about the sea. I wanted something simple. I like machines, wiring, repair work. I've had a dozen jobs over the years, some legal, some less so. A few contracts offshore, 1 year working night shifts for a freight company, another as a tech hand for a fishing outfit that didn't ask many questions. I drifted a lot, took what paid. I don't really care where I live as long as the check clears and nobody bothers me. This job pays more than it should. That's what caught my eye. And I needed the money. My dental's been bad for a while now, and when your gums hurt every time you eat something cold, you stop thinking about dignity. You take what you can. The post came up through a contractor that doesn't advertise in public. Not online, not in print. You get it through word of mouth. Dock workers, old-timers, folks who know where to look. The application was short. No references, no paperwork, just coordinates and a note. Maintain the systems. Keep the light operational. Supplies delivered bi-weekly. I figured it was some offshore weather station or one of those old Navy sites they never cleaned up. The ride out took 3 hours on a small supply boat. Choppy water, no land in sight after the first 40 minutes. The guy who dropped me off didn't introduce himself, just helped unload the crates, pointed out where the food stores were kept, handed me a single-page manual, and left without looking back. I asked if someone would come to pick me up, and he didn't answer. And now I live here. The tower stands on a rock island. Not much more than a slab of stone jutting up from the ocean. No soil, no trees, no birds. Just the lighthouse, a metal dock for the boat, and a supply shed bolted to the rock. Inside the tower are 5 floors: storage, generator, living quarters, watch deck, and the lamp itself. It smells like salt and old wires. The walls creak when the wind hits just right. Sometimes the lights flicker, but they always come back. I keep them fixed. Most days are quiet. I check the systems, backup batteries, rotating lens, pressure seals. I run diagnostics. Make sure the beacon cycles properly every 45 seconds. That's what it's all about. The light. Everything else is just to keep that going. I eat canned food and dry rations. I read books, mostly ones left by the last guy. Some nonfiction, some sci-fi, nothing special. There's a radio, but it only picks up weather reports and an emergency channel that's been silent the whole time I've been here. My phone doesn't get signal, not even a flicker. Sometimes I wonder if they forgot about me. But then the supplies show up, like clockwork, every other Friday. That's the one thing that stays the same. Means someone still knows I'm out here. Someone's still paying me. The only other person out here is Joey. I didn't ask for a companion. When I took the job, I expected to be alone. That was kind of the point. But he arrived a few days after I did. He didn't work for the same contractor, at least not officially. Nobody warned me about him, and there's no record of him in the manual. Just a second buck and a nameplate on the door. Joseph H. Mallory. Joey says he's here for the same reason I am. Maintenance, oversight, daily checks. But he talks more than anyone I've met. And not just about the job. Mostly, he talks about treasure. He says this lighthouse was built on top of a shipwreck. A Spanish galleon that went down in 1722, carrying gold, from a temple nobody remembers. According to him, it didn't just sink, it was dragged down. He says old sailors believed the treasure was cursed and that the ocean swallowed the ship on purpose. Joey's great-grandfather was a diver. He disappeared in these same waters while looking for the wreck. Joey grew up on the stories. Now he says he's continuing the search, though I haven't seen him dive once. What he does do is stay up late, staring at sonar readings and muttering about coordinates. He has stacks of charts, old books, and photocopied maps taped to the walls in his room. Most of them are hand-labeled in pencil. He keeps them in neat rows, like he's building a case. He talks like someone out of an old radio show. Says things like, "By thunder," and "she'll not stay down forever." The first time I heard him say, "blasted contraption," I laughed. That's just how he talks. Says it's the way men used to sound. Says the world was better when people had respect for the sea and better vocabulary. And you can't argue with that. Weird part is, he's actually read a lot. Not science journals or history books, but novels. Moby Dick, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Treasure Island. He quotes them all the time, and sometimes I think he believes he's inside one of them. He insists the lighthouse wasn't built just to warn ships. He thinks it's a seal, holding something down, something tied to the wreck. He points to the location, how the tides pull two directions, how the compasses don't work right. He says locals call this part of the ocean the mouth of the sea. I looked it up once. It's real. Sailors do avoid this patch of water. There's no official explanation, but ships go missing here. Not all the time, but enough. The last guy left behind a list of recorded disappearances. Some go back 100 years. The supply boat comes twice a month. They drop off crates of food, water, fuel, and a printout of any system updates. They never stay long. Sometimes I wave, but they don't wave back. Joey says they're afraid of this place. I don't know, I think they're just doing their job. The lighthouse itself was built in 1903. That's the version standing now. The documents say 3 others were built before it. 1 fell in a storm. 1 caught fire. The 3rd just collapsed from old age, they said. But Joey says that's a lie. He says there was an original tower, the first one ever built here. According to him, it didn't fail. It disappeared. He says the foundation of this one sits right on top of the original wreck, that the gold is still down there, chained by old world rituals. He says the light we maintain isn't just for ships. It keeps the curse from spreading. Joey believes in a lot of things. I do my job. I check the systems. I keep the beacon running. Every 45 seconds, the light turns. That's all I have to worry about. I've been working here long enough to know what matters and what doesn't. Out here, no one's coming to help if you screw up. There's no rescue plan, no backup crew, no second chances. Just ocean in every direction, and a job that doesn't care how you feel about it. Over time, I figured out a way to stay sane and stay alive. I started keeping my own rules. Here's the first one. Rule number 1. Always check the lights and the sonars. That's the first rule I came up with when I took this job. Didn't take long to figure out what mattered most. If you let the lights fail or the sonars fall behind, you're not doing your job. And out here, that's all you've got. Your job and your habits. Most people think lighthouses are only about the light. Big beam, long reach, keep ships away from rocks. That's true, but it's only part of what we do here. The other part is the sonar grid. That system is just as important, and maybe more so. It keeps track of what's moving down below. The sonar was installed in the 1980s. There had been a run of disappearances in this region. Some were commercial cargo ships, some private vessels. The explanations didn't add up. The weather wasn't always bad. The routes were well known. Most of the time, no wreckage was found. First, the usual excuses came out. Bad navigation, human error, old equipment. Later, they said it might be magnetic interference. Something about this stretch of ocean makes compasses drift and radios cut out. But those problems didn't explain what started happening in 1986. That year, all the sonar stations in a 10-mile radius picked up something at the same time. The signal came from deep in the trench near the base of the shelf. It was 3 pulses, low frequency, slow and steady. Wasn't a whale call or some machinery. It came from straight down. The engineers assumed it was a technical fault. They checked the equipment, ran diagnostics, pulled logs. Everything came back clear. The timestamps matched across multiple stations. The signal happened. They didn't know what caused it, but it was real. After that, they made some upgrades, added redundancy to the sonar grid, improved sensitivity, and doubled the power supply. A few years later, a version of the same event happened again. And again, it wasn't explained. And that's when they changed the protocol for new keepers. Everyone gets the same warning now when they take the job. Keep the lights on. Keep the sonars clean. Don't look out too long when the screen goes blank. The light system is straightforward. The main lens is old but reliable. It rotates on a timed motor and emits a beam every 45 seconds. That beam reaches for miles across the water. It's your job to make sure it stays that way. That means checking the motor, wiping the lens, replacing bulbs, and testing the backup generator. If the light goes out, there's no safety net. The sonar grid is on the second floor. There are 4 monitors connected to a single interface. 1 keyboard, a switchboard, and a power bank that runs off the main generator and a secondary cell. The scans run every 6 hours unless triggered manually. When they run, the software compares what's out there to the last clean scan. Anything that moves, grows, or rises gets flagged. If something shows up that wasn't there before, you make a note. That's it. Most of the time, the system logs harmless changes. Fish schools, debris, drift from passing storms. We've seen everything from lost shipping containers to whale pods. But once in a while, we get a shape that doesn't match anything obvious. Big, fast, sometimes motionless. Joey keeps his own records. He prints out the sonar snapshots, draws on them, and tapes them to the wall in a grid. He uses a system of dots, circles, and colored lines to show where things appeared and how often. He says there's a pattern. I let him work it out. Doesn't bother me. This morning, we did the routine check together. First scan of the day. Everything came up clear. Nothing new, I said, watching the screen. No repeats either. That's something, Joey said. It's just normal movements, current shifts. Fish don't stay in one place, I replied over a mug of coffee. He tapped the monitor once with his pen. Unless something else is listening, he said. He talks like that sometimes, as if the ocean is watching us, not the other way around. I logged the scan and reset the system. Joey pulled one of his old logs out of the drawer. Look here, March 19th. Big dip. Same coordinates as last month. It's probably a scan glitch, I replied. He shook his head. No, same size, same depth, same return time. It rose, paused, and dropped again. I didn't argue. I've learned it doesn't go anywhere. You know what this job really is, I said. What? He asked, humoring me. It's cleaning light bulbs and babysitting a sonar fence, I said as I handed him his third mug of coffee. He smiled. You think small, that's your problem. And you think everything is connected, I countered. Well, one of us will be right someday, he said with a wave. The next scan was scheduled in 5 hours. Between then and now, I planned to check the wiring again. Joey said he'd go through another stack of logs, maybe chart out more of those dots he keeps drawing. And that was our rhythm, light on, scan clear, light on, scan clear. It was easy to stop thinking about why we were doing it. After a while, it just turned into routine. A checklist. Power levels, bulb inspection, signal strength, battery check. But every now and then, I'd think back to what the man said when I first got here. The one who dropped me off on the supply boat. Didn't explain much. Just handed me the manual, pointed at the tower, and said something quiet, like it was part of the job. Keep the lights on. Keep the sonars clear. Don't look out too long when the screen goes blank. I hadn't seen the screen go blank yet, but I checked it twice every shift just in case. That was rule 1. Made sense. Practical. Measurable. But there were other rules too. Stranger ones. Which brings me to rule 2. Beware the kraken. The second rule is printed in the manual that came with the job. It's not hidden or in fine print. It's there on page 4, in the same section as the emergency flare procedures and light maintenance schedule. It just says rule 2, beware the kraken. Nothing else. No paragraph, no description, and no background information. When I first read it, of course I thought it was a joke. The rest of the manual was technical, most of it anyway. How to check fuses, what tools to use for lens cleaning, which breakers to reset if the generator failed. And then that line showed up, and it felt like someone's idea of a test. I underlined it and moved on. 2 weeks later, I stopped thinking it was a hazing joke. It happened during one of the calmest nights I've seen out here. The ocean was completely flat. There was no wind, no waves. Even the usual noises, like the creaking of the dock or the thump of water against the rocks, were gone. The sky was clear, and the light from the beacon swept across the sea without any resistance. It was quiet enough that I could hear the relay click each time the lens rotated. I was upstairs running a sonar scan. We run full sweeps 4 times a day and check the lights every few hours in between. The sonar scans cover the trench just off the shelf. That trench drops deeper than normal ocean charts show. Most people assume it's just a natural fault line. We were never told otherwise. The sonar alarm went off around 11:42 p.m. First I thought it was a malfunction. The system will sometimes trigger alerts if the power dips or if salt builds up on the contact panels. But when I checked the monitor, I saw something. There was a mass rising from the bottom of the trench. It wasn't fast, but it was bigger than anything I'd seen on the screen before. Came up slowly, 1 meter at a time. The system couldn't get a clear shape. It just filled the screen with a moving, dense object too large to define. I called Joey upstairs. He was already on his way. The tower started to vibrate while I watched the signal. It wasn't shaking like in a storm. There was no wind, and the sea hadn't changed. This was different. It felt like pressure coming from beneath the foundation, like the island itself was responding to something moving underneath. Joey didn't say anything at first. He just looked at the monitor, then out the window. I followed him to the main glass and looked too. The water about 60 meters out had started to shift. An outline formed on the surface, and then something thick and dark started rising. A tentacle came out of the water. It was black, maybe just really dark. There were large white suckers running along the underside, each one the size of a dinner plate. Some were covered in barnacles or sea growth. The tentacle reached out and dragged itself across the rocks at the edge of the island, and then it curled partially around the base of the lighthouse. The metal groaned when it made contact. I could feel it under my boots. The structure didn't shift much, but it moved just enough to remind me that we weren't standing on anything solid. Just concrete bolted into a rock shelf that probably shouldn't hold this much weight. Neither of us said anything for a while. We watched as the tentacle stayed there for almost a full minute. It didn't tighten, didn't pull. It just rested, like it was testing something. The water around it had changed too. It wasn't clear anymore. It had gone cloudy and dark, not like storm water, but more like oil or sludge. When the tentacle slid back into the ocean, it left behind that same dark liquid floating on the surface. I marked the time in the logbook, but my hand was shaking. I stared at the page for a long time before writing anything down. After a minute, I closed the book and turned to Joey. "What the hell was that?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just stood there at the window, arms crossed, watching the last of the ripples fade. Then he turned, walked over, and slapped me on the back like we just finished fixing a pipe or patched a leak. "That was a kraken, my boy," he said, grinning like he'd been waiting his whole life to say it. He said it like it was obvious, like the name explained everything. I just looked at him, then back out at the water. It was calm again, like nothing had happened. "You've seen this before?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, I've heard about it, read about it. First time seeing it with my own 2 eyes. I've been waiting 20 years, and it was worth every second." I didn't say anything back. I didn't have anything to say. We stood there for a little longer, both of us staring at the empty ocean, listening to the steady hum of the tower. Eventually, Joey wandered off to check his sonar printouts. I stayed behind and kept watch out the window, just in case. The next morning, I went down to the storage room. There's a cabinet filled with records from previous keepers. Most of it's routine data, supply list, maintenance records, parts request, weather logs, stuff like that. At the bottom of one drawer, I found a small wooden box. Inside were 3 notebooks wrapped in cloth. The covers were labeled only with dates. They were handwritten logs kept by earlier Lighthouse staff. I don't know if they were meant to be official. They weren't typed or stamped. Just page after page of daily notes, drawn maps, sonar charts, and sketches of the trench. Each notebook had entries describing something similar to what we saw. A large object rising from the trench. Tentacles, suckers, movement near the lighthouse base. One of the earlier entries described hearing metal strain under pressure. Another included a list of symptoms after contact: power fluctuations, signal interference, animal disappearances. One keeper marked the events on a calendar. The gaps between them weren't regular, but each happened between 40 and 60 years apart. I didn't show the notebooks to Joey. He already believes more than he should. He has his own explanations, and adding more would only feed the problem. Now when I check the sonar grid, I take longer. I double-check the depth markers. I watch for sudden rises. I never used to be the kind of person who said the ocean's full of things we don't understand, but I believe that now. Rule 3. Ignore the sirens. The old keepers wrote about it in their private logs. The locals talk about it like it's common knowledge. Even the Coast Guard has a technical term for it. But nobody tells you straight until it happens. Started a few months back, when the fog was so dense you couldn't see past your hand. It would roll in fast within minutes, trapping small boats in zero visibility weather. The day it started, we were told to assist with a search. A distress signal had been picked up about 7 nautical miles east of the lighthouse, not far from a shipping lane. One of the fishing boats had gone out at night alone. The man who took it was a local, lived down in St. George's. His name was Roger, mid-50s, widowed. Used to captain a tour boat before business dried up. He'd launched in a small skiff just after sundown. No radio, no GPS beacon. Just a flashlight and a life vest. People on shore said they tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. Told them he'd heard someone calling out from the water. Said it was his wife's voice. His wife had died 3 years earlier. The Coast Guard logged it as a possible disorientation incident. They called us early the next morning, said we were closest to the last known coordinates, and asked if we could help scan the area. Joey and I checked the sonar first. We didn't find anything unusual. No wreckage, no large contacts. Just open water and a whole lot of fog. Around 9 a.m., we started sweeping the area by boat. It's not part of our usual duties, but this kind of thing happens sometimes. When someone goes missing out here, and there's no one else close enough to assist, we're expected to help. We split the grid and searched in circles. Joey manned the bow while I handled the throttle and comms. We found Roger at 10:42 a.m. His boat was upside down, floating low in the water. Joey spotted it first. A pale blue hull drifting sideways, just barely above the surface. The current had carried it further north than expected. The man was still alive. He was lying across the hull like he tried to crawl on top of it, but hadn't made it far. His arms were scraped up. Wasn't wearing his life vest anymore. We pulled him aboard and gave him a thermal blanket. He didn't resist. He didn't say anything. Joey asked him what happened. He kept looking past us out toward the open water. After a few minutes, he said, "She called to me." And that was all he'd say for the rest of the trip back. Later, the paramedic said he was dehydrated and mildly hypothermic. Said he probably hadn't slept in 2 days. Said he was lucky we found him. Joey didn't think it was luck. He kept his voice low on the way back. Told me about stories he'd read in the older keeper logs. Said some of them used to bring beeswax with them. They'd plug their ears during certain tides, especially after long, calm nights. Others used to recite psalms or sing out loud to drown out what they heard. I asked him what they were trying to block out. He said, "Sirens, boy. Sirens." At first, I figured he was just leaning into another one of his theories, but I went back to the cabinet the next day and read through more of the logs. The handwriting changed from keeper to keeper, but the entries matched up. One said, "Heard something last night. Sounded like my mother calling from the reef." Another wrote, "Don't answer. Don't speak. Don't turn toward it." One entry simply said, "Singing. Low, familiar. Plugged ears, but it didn't stop." The entries were spaced years apart, but the content was the same. Someone would hear a voice they recognized, usually a dead loved one. It would come from the sea, usually on still nights or after long stretches without storms. Sometimes it sounded far off, other times close. In a few entries, the keepers admitted they nearly went outside to check. The official explanation is auditory phenomenon. It's listed in a Coast Guard training supplement I found tucked inside an old binder. It describes it as a combination of sleep deprivation, environmental frequency distortion, and psychological stress. Basically, it's your brain playing tricks on you, using the sound of the sea and your own memories to create something that feels real. The locals don't call it that. They still call it temptation. They say the sea tries to draw people out when it's real quiet, especially those who've lost someone. They say it doesn't shout or scream. It sings. I've never heard it myself, but Joey has. A few months after we found that lost drifter, Joey started keeping beeswax in his locker. He said it was just in case. I didn't press him about it. He's not the type to lie about what he hears, even if he does dramatize some of it. One night, I found him sitting up in the main room, headphones on, listening to an old cassette player. He didn't notice I was there until I asked him what he was playing. "Oh, just noise. Something to keep my head busy," he said. He told me he'd heard someone the night before. Said it was his grandfather's voice, calling from the rocks. His grandfather died when Joey was 12. I keep my headphones nearby now. I play static, or music, or nothing at all, just enough to fill the space. I check the locks on the upper platform doors every night before I sleep. I stay away from the windows when the water's calm. There's no line about sirens in the job description. There's no audio warning built into the sonar. But after what we saw, I treat it like protocol. Ignore the sirens. I've read enough of the old logs to know that this has been happening for a long time. Different names, different stories, same pattern. You hear something that feels familiar, and then you make a mistake. You can't stop the sea from calling, but you can choose not to listen. And that leads us to Rule 4. Rule 4. Turn off the lights when you see the dead ships. Joey was the one who gave them that name, dead ships. He saw one before I did. He said it looked like a ship made of fog, glowing blue, drifting just above the surface like a reflection that didn't belong to anything. He thought it was a weather trick at first, maybe some weird refraction of moonlight bouncing off mist. But then he saw the figures. They were walking across the deck. They didn't speak. They didn't look around. They just moved in slow, steady lines. One man pushed a mop across empty wood. Another coiled a rope that wasn't there. A third leaned over the rail as if checking the waves. All of them looked solid and present, until the lighthouse beam touched the ship. And then they were gone. That's why Joey came up with a rule. You don't let the light touch them. You turn the beacon off and let them pass. The official manual doesn't mention the dead ships. There's nothing in the procedures about turning off the light for any reason other than power conservation or maintenance. But I've seen them myself now. And I understand why the older keepers kept records anyway. The first one I saw came through just after 3 a.m. The radar didn't catch it. The sonar didn't show anything. I was doing a routine window check from the watch room and saw something blue moving through the fog to the north. Wasn't bright, but it had its own glow. A dull blue outline around what looked like a small freighter. No flags, no markings. Just a hull, a deck, and a single mast. It didn't make a sound. The fog stayed around it like it was glued in place. I turned off the light. The switch is manual. There's no automation for this part. If you don't make the decision fast, the rotation will pass over the ship. I stepped forward and cut the beam just before it would have swept that direction. I watched it move. There were at least 4 people on deck, or what looked like people. One was coiling rope, just like Joey said. Another was standing at the helm. His hands moved like he was turning something. The wheel wasn't visible. Neither was the rudder. But he kept turning it back and forth as if something still responded. I kept the lights off until the ship passed behind the rocks to the west. When I turned the beam back on, the water was empty again. The first time you see one, it's hard to explain. Doesn't feel like a spooky story. It feels like, well, a mistake. Like something got left behind and no one knows how to shut it down. Joey thinks they're what's left of the ships that vanished in the triangle. He says they're stuck here, still doing what they did in their last moments. He thinks they're looking for something. I asked him once what they were looking for. He said, "Oh, probably land. Probably home." The local fishermen have their own names for them. Some call them sea lanterns. Some call them gliders. One old man told us never to watch them for too long. Said if you stare too long, you start to see faces you recognize. I don't know if that's true, but I don't stare anymore. I call them black pearls. I got it from that old pirate movie. The one where the cursed ship sails under the moonlight and the crew can't die. It felt fitting, and Joey got a kick out of it. The earliest keeper logbook I could find that mentioned the dead ships was dated 1919. The handwriting was neat and exact. The entry said, "Observed blue vessel behind fog line. Figures on deck repeated tasks without pause. Light struck bow. Ship vanished instantly. Kept light off during second pass. Figures did not respond." Later in the same book, another entry described a keeper who failed to dim the light. The ship vanished like before, but that keeper wrote that he saw something else, something beyond the crew. He never explained it in detail. His last entry was short. "Not meant to see that. Can't sleep. Can't eat. Must leave." According to the station notes, he jumped into the water 2 weeks later. His body was found days after that, caught in a tide pool, half a mile east. Joey says he thinks the ships are drawn to the lighthouse, like moths. Every time I see one, I get this itch to pray, even though I'm not religious. I haven't, but I think about it. Well, that's all the rules I've got so far. 4 of them. Simple enough on paper, huh? But they've kept me alive out here longer than most. You'd be surprised how many don't last more than a season. Some leave, some disappear. A few just stop answering the radio one day. The supply boat comes, finds everything in place. Lights spinning, logs updated, kettle still warm. No keeper in sight. Joey talks a lot, and for a long time, I tuned most of it out. Half the time it sounded like sea tales, or something he pieced together from old novels and half-read logbooks. But lately, I've been listening more. There's more out here. More stories, more monsters. That much I am sure of now. And this job, it's not just maintenance. It's not just about the equipment. I'd be a fool to still think that after everything I have seen so far. So if you're reading this, maybe because you're thinking about taking the same job, or maybe because something led you down a rabbit hole of old Lighthouse records, here's my advice. Take the rules seriously. Every one of them. You won't get a proper briefing. No one's going to explain the weird stuff to you. Most people don't even know what this lighthouse is really for. But if you're the kind of person who doesn't mind quiet nights, strange readings, and the feeling that something is watching just out of sight, well, we could use the help. And if you end up stationed out here one day, well, Joey and I will have a few more stories for you. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. Special thank you to all my patrons. If you'd like to become a supporter on Patreon, there's a link in the description. I hope you have a great night, and thanks for watching.